Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt, Carson. Hello.
Hey, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. I am back after a small hiatus. Your interview with the professional studio setup, and it looked beautiful. It was well done. I appreciate you taking that on.
Oh, absolutely. It got me a little bit, I don't know, in a shopping mood where I feel like, oh man, I got to upgrade my microphones. We need better cameras. We need better lighting in all these spaces. And I'm like, well, let's just scale back and be happy with what we have, right?
Pump the brakes, right?
Yeah, it's easy to spend a lot of money.
Oh, very much so. My office in my basement from podcasting and work is already just full of technology that I had to learn to use. So God knows, throwing a 4K camera or something on there might blow up my computer. Who knows?
Yeah, it was a new challenge of trying to move extremely large video files and edit all that kind of stuff compared to just our normal webcam, export, get things going. So it took a little bit more work, but man, do I feel like that end result it's something, a whole new level that we haven't really produced yet. So
it's beautiful. It makes me want to set up like a Between Two Ferns stage in my basement. Fake trees, a comfy chair.
We should do that if we're ever just recording in person. We can each have one in each of our respective basements, just a mirrored setup.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Just do a big IKEA trip.
A big IKEA, yeah. We need two of everything. Anyways, Tanner, what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so one of the things that we talk a lot about this podcast is the difference between being a problem solver and being a order taker. So that's one of the concepts that I keep kind of mulling around in my head and then thinking about what's the underlying theme of this podcast, who is our general audience, like our prime audience that we really want to target. And I heard a phrase recently that I thought it was really in alignment because we bring on a lot of entrepreneurs into the podcast to interview and do things like that. And I heard the term intrapreneur. So rather than someone who goes out and starts their own company, these are people who have the same traits, a lot of the same skill sets, but use that within an organization to help grow and prosper their career and help grow the company. So I thought we could do a discussion about kind of the difference between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur, a lot of the shared skill sets, and then depending on, where you think you might fit, the type of content we produce could be even more relevant to you.
Absolutely. So we've hit on this topic before a little bit. I think we've talked about it in passing. Exactly as you said, there's lots of entrepreneurs that we've talked to and interviewed and spoke to on the side. And we even had a few intrapreneurs, but we haven't really focused on that. And being someone who I assume, and I'll get to your definitions here really quick, is I assume I fit very firmly under the category of an intrapreneur. And it might be a refreshing take because I think some of the skill sets are very similar, but I bet there's some very key points that keep them on very separate sides of the field. So can you define those two? Especially intrapreneur, for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So went to good old ChatGPT because I figured that's the best way to kind of condense a lot of information right away. So according to ChatGPT, because forget Webster and all those things, an entrepreneur is an individual who creates and manages a new business, taking on the risks with the hope of earning profits, while an intrapreneur is an employee within a company who applies entrepreneurial skills to develop new products, services, or processes for the organization.
Okay. So I guess that was a little different than I expected, but I like it. It makes a lot of sense. The intrapreneur brings entrepreneurial skills to an already existing business that they don't personally own or anything like that. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and so much of what I think of an entrepreneur is a problem solver. It's someone who can solve novel ideas that aren't just commonly solved all across the board and can get rewarded for that. And we often think about like, oh, I have a great idea. This market is being underserved. Let me go out on my own, start a company to build a product or service to solve that problem. But if you can really think about being an intrapreneur and along those same lines, so rather than you having to go out yourself and do all those things, you can use the resources of an established company yourself to get a lot of the same goals and provide a lot of value. Because we often think about people within a company as that order taker. The person who's not really thinking independently for themselves, somebody who is just following processes and things like that. But there is a lot of opportunity to really step up within an organization, apply a lot of those entrepreneurial skills, and get a lot of the same, if not greater, financial reward without all of the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think that do you think an entrepreneur can become a successful intrapreneur or vice versa?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest difference, I think there's a lot of personalities that have, I think we talked about it before, called demand avoidance, where they just can't work for other people. And you hear about that a lot, especially in the small business owners. They're just like, oh, I can never go back to having a boss. They have to be their own bosses. And those are the type of people who really struggle within the corporate world. And I don't think would have as much success, but I would wager, it's the 80-20 rule. Probably 80% of people, maybe even greater, don't have that severe demand avoidance to where they're basically unemployable. But you have a lot of people more in the middle who can have a lot of independent ideas, a lot of being like visionary type situations, a lot of really strong problem solving ability, and do want to take a lot of ownership within that, but don't want to take all of the risks or go as far as starting their own company. So they can take a lead within an organization or just provide a lot of value with whatever role they're in, applying a lot of those same skill sets.
Whether you choose the path of an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, it's kind of like a scale. The more you put your efforts into one side, the more you're going to lose on the other. So the intrapreneur, for example, you're spot on. They get already existing resources. There's not that much risk in doing their job there. In exchange, the compensation could probably be significantly less depending on the success of your imaginary entrepreneurship venture, right? So you forego risk while also foregoing potential massive compensation and success with revenue. It's kind of a matter of what you need versus an entrepreneur. You're taking on all the risk, tons of risk. And by doing that, you are foregoing existing resources and kind of a team that backs you up, right? So what makes one person choose one versus the other? Is it just risk avoidance? Is that the biggest factor?
I think that people need to evaluate where they're at in their lives, right? So when I was a lot younger and I didn't have as much responsibility such as like a family and a mortgage and could live on basically nothing in a house with a bunch of guys, just having someone living in the living room, someone in the basement, someone in the bedrooms, and we just all split the rent and can live super cheap. I can take a lot more risk at that time and I can be in a different situation because if I do fail, well, then I'm not out much. But then there's times where you do have a lot of responsibility or a lot of overhead or different things. You're just at a different point in your life where perhaps that gamble isn't going to be worth the role. So I think there's a lot of different things. And again, it can vary because you can do a lot within a company and eventually branch out. We've seen that with certain people who kind of develop their idea and then go off on their own once they hit a certain threshold. Or you can get people who just right away, right when they get that spark of the idea, quit all their jobs and then go away. And I think practically, and I would wager if you kind of survey most business owners, most people are a lot more practical. They probably spend quite a while like after work or doing those things to try to build up those things for their business before taking the big leap because they can't do those things. But I wouldn't discount the ability to provide a lot of value to your company because that's a great way to grow within your career and grow within the organization because not everybody needs to be an owner, founder, CEO. There's a lot of CEOs who started off in a mailroom and worked their way up. And I think both should be valued within our culture because we always, and again, with this podcast, we feature a lot of entrepreneurs, but that is not everybody, if not even the majority of the people who would find it appealing to go off and do those things. So I think there's a lot of value to think of yourself as an intrapreneur and then apply a lot of those skills to really grow your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So what other key differences? And then we talk about similarities, but what other key differences are you seeing between these two?
With an entrepreneur, you get full control. That's one of the biggest things. Again, that's the appeal of it, right? Where you don't have layers of bureaucracy above you, depending on the size of the organization. You don't get to report to somebody like an owner. You can have all that control yourself. And that ownership is such a big part of it too, because not every company has like staff shares or stock options and all those things. So a lot of the hard work and effort you do, again, may not see those large financial returns or those things because you're not taking the risk for them. And again, you touched on it earlier, there's like this limitless potential, and there's no ceiling potentially for starting your own business and taking those risks. So, you are tempering some of the potential upsides with a certain amount of safety or resources that you're getting beforehand. Other things that you would, do as being like an entrepreneur is, you're responsible for like all the branding, all the aspects, or at least building the team to do so. So that, going into a place that has an established team already, you can work with a lot of resources. And then hopefully if you get in a position of like leadership or something like that, you can help define that a little bit more. But it's all on you as an entrepreneur. But, some of the advantage of being an intrapreneur, one, again, we talked about resource availability. So having the large things, there's stable income. Gosh, man, this is just a whole side thing. When I had my own company, you didn't know if you would get a consistent paycheck. You got paid when the company had money in the checking account. So there was a lot of times where I just didn't have a paycheck and I would live very within my means or try to get some loans or borrow some money from some friends to make rent, all while, trying to keep this money gobbling monster of a business going, which, can turn, a lot of those businesses can, act up in some ways. Other things, you wouldn't have access to things like healthcare. That's one of the first things that in my life now is a huge priority for me. I'm working for another company because I can finally get really nice healthcare for my family and me compared to before where I was living on what I refer to as, oh crap, cancer insurance, just paying ridiculous amounts of money for insane deductibles. I want to say it was almost like 5-figure deductibles. Just ridiculous. And it made no sense because when you're in your early 20s, you would assume like, okay, I'm low risk, but no, they just charge you. Some of the other things that being like an intrapreneur can really give you too is things like networking access because you're around a bunch of people. You don't have to kind of build your own networks. You have the full organizational support like an HR department, payroll, all those things you don't have to do yourself. And also a lot of times companies have really good learning opportunities. Again, you're not going off trying to just read books and do everything yourself. There's learning development departments who can really build up and train and monitor and grow you within the organization. So just a lot of abilities to finesse and do things without doing it all by yourself.
Absolutely. So how do you decide? I mean, as two people who were both married, we both have kids. That steady paycheck and benefits sure is nice, but everyone has that desire. We say it a million times in this podcast is everyone out there has a business idea, right? Where's the launching point? Where do people decide that they want to stop being an intrapreneur and be an entrepreneur?
Let me pose a question back at you. What is your decision mechanism? Because, you're at the point where I would consider you a very strong intrapreneur. You've done a lot within your current organization. You've been growing like crazy. I know you were the AI czar at one point, if not still. So what is keeping you there as an entrepreneur compared to potentially just taking a leap and going out fully on your own?
That is a good question. So I think my current, job, my role, I believe one thing that's really kept me a strong intrapreneur is the value I bring to the company, but probably more importantly, and this might just be my personality, is that I'm showed that I'm valuable. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I'm given the leeway to experiment, try new things, develop new products or services, for example. And I'm respected in my capacity. No one blows smoke, but they're not just trying to appease me to keep me there, but I do good work and I'm recognized for that good work, and I feel compensated and patted on the back appropriately. And that's a big thing for me. Of course, I would love to be an entrepreneur. The risks right now are heavy. For example, finances. I'll only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure neither of us are rich. And, it'd be pretty hard to forego 6 months to a year of salary. In fact, it might be near impossible to wipe out savings, that sort of thing. So it's a mix between being appreciated and respected for the work you do in the company and fear of failure. If I decided to drop everything right now and go on an adventure and try and start my own business, I don't know where I would be financially in 6 months, and no one does. And that's a big cliff to dive off of. So I think that's what keeps me pretty firmly rooted is steady finances. I didn't even think about benefits, insurance, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's pretty dang important. Maybe if we lived in Canada or something and my healthcare wouldn't be that big of a deal. I don't really know how that works. Yeah, I think it's fear and just finding a good place that respects you for the value you bring to the company.
I think one thing also that's important for you that's been really important for me is the balance between work and life.
Sure.
Because that's one of those big pieces that when you're off doing everything yourself, it's all consuming. And so having the ability to just kind of clock in, clock out. And I mean, because you as an intrapreneur share a lot of the same traits as an entrepreneur, it's a little hard to check out at times. You're always kind of mulling to work and putting in some extra hours so you can get things done. But it is a big, you talked about commitment, and that's a huge thing that goes with it.
One thing I think we're missing from this conversation is, and I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you, does just working for a company make you an intrapreneur?
Oh, absolutely not. So that's the going back to the problem solver versus order taker. Because there's a lot of business owners that just take orders. I wouldn't consider them entrepreneurs. Just like there's a lot of workers, and I would say probably the majority of people just treat their career as a job, whatever role they're in as a job. But it's the certain type of people who really are, again, problem solvers for certain novel ideas that go above and they can rise to that entrepreneurial state by doing it themselves, or intrapreneurial state for doing it within an organization, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had both jobs. I've been an order taker, or someone who just does the job that is assigned to them and they leave at the end of the day. Then I've moved into the next stage of my career, you can say, where I feel I'm the problem solver, not but one of them, and every personality is different, and I think that's one thing we need to get across here is some people absolutely cannot function working for a boss. They are, and they have a higher risk tolerance. Those people are made to be entrepreneurs. That's great. Some people don't have the capability to run out and start their own business or have the ability to forego those benefits, and are perfectly content just clocking in at 8 o'clock and leaving at 5 o'clock after they've done XYZ task, and they move on and they do wonderful things in their personal life, and that's just how they live, and that's perfectly fine too. And then some people choose to take the in-between path, the intrapreneur path, and really invest themselves in the company and the existing company and try and make it better. And by doing that, you not only make the company you work for better, which is great, but I think you make yourself better. It would be very hard for me to move into a order taker position anymore. If I find a problem, I just want to solve it. And I think that's what firmly roots me in the intrapreneur. Now, it's not always about working extra hours. And I'm a huge fan and believer in work-life balance. Once my work's done, I'm done. I'm off helping kids with homework or playing Stardew Valley with my wife. Don't ask. It's a whole thing. But yeah, sure. There are some times, you and I talked, there's a couple weeks ago back when I had a really tough project. I was working all day, every day through the weekends, busting my butt for, a couple weeks, way over that 40-hour mark. And it paid off in the end. It wasn't fun, but it paid off because you put that extra effort into it and the company appreciates it. And I think at the end, I appreciated it because I got some good work done. So it's not about the order taker, the entrepreneur, or the intrapreneur being one of them being worse than the other. That's not at all the point. It's simply about what you want in your life and what your priorities are and your values lie, right?
Yeah, I would say there is definitely a distinction, though, between being a problem solver and being an order taker in terms of what's valuable. And
yeah.
I would really evaluate whatever you're doing along those lines, because if you're just following the instructions, you're never going to, move forward or really grow, because you're not producing enough value to really move beyond whatever current parameters that business has already been set. Because that's a job. They'll pay you X because they know they can get X plus Y out of your output. And I know you, Wyatt, are like the master of kind of determining those margins and those values, because that's your job of, process improvement. But what the real reward is by not just producing X, but it's a variable of X. So if you can do multiples and provide even more and more, one is you'll provide a lot of value to the company to get recognition and move up within it. Or again, if you're doing entrepreneurial things, that's how you grow your own companies. Because if you're only doing the bare minimum, you're just always going to be on that plateau. So I think that it's the certain traits that they share are the things that we really need to identify and value, and as a listener, really need to find within yourself or work on to hit that next, the next step up, be the better person. And I was just thinking again, who is our target audience, and what is the content that they would want to find useful? And it's irregardless if you work for a company or if you have your own company. It's people who want to go out above and beyond and be the true problem solvers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's it's okay to be that order takers is what I'm trying to say. There's nothing wrong. You're not a bad person. You're not lazy. In fact, you can be one of the hardest working people I know. The difference between that entrepreneur and intrapreneur is going a step above and beyond. And, there's a lot of pessimistic views about the intrapreneur, about going above and beyond for a company that will not pay you back for your extra effort, and they're not going to pay you more, etc. Maybe, and I can understand some of those pessimistic views, but I would also challenge those views in saying, if you work for a company that would not value or respect you going above and beyond for the better of the company, maybe it's not your approach, maybe it's your company. Maybe the value they're placing on you is set at a limit and it's never going to go above and beyond, and you're already limited. And in that case, working 60 hours a week may never get you anywhere. And then I don't recommend going above and beyond. That's a whole other, discussion. But I think if you have a good company that recognizes success, being an entrepreneur can be a very, very lucrative way to live your life and a very lucrative way to run your career.
Yeah, well, and being an entrepreneur, you're always looking for and seizing opportunity. And the same goes with intrapreneurs. So if you're not getting the same opportunity within your company, you will find other companies that will, as long as you're producing enough value and have something to show for it. So, I mean, that's really the key difference, because rather than just being somebody within a slot and a role and feeling like you're stuck there, if you're producing enough value, you'll get momentum within one organization, or you'll have the ability to get that within someone else, because you yourself are, taking the agency, doing the things, providing the value. You're not just slotting in, waiting for someone else to recognize you and then perhaps will promote you because you're following all the steps. It's like, no, we make our own opportunities in so many ways, and we go and we seize those moments. So again, it's a good thing. I mean, whether you are somebody who wants to work for themselves or work within an organization, again, I think the whole point of this conversation has been you can do either or, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you should think of yourself along those lines, because the moment you go back to just following the status quo, following the steps, whether that's within your own company, because I see that all the time, it's the same business, and you go back 5 years later and it's the same business. Those people are not entrepreneurs, in my opinion. Those people are just, business owners.
Absolutely. No, 100%. There's a difference between starting a business with intent and goals to grow and expand, and starting for example, side hustles. Side hustles usually fall in the category of a job, less so than an entrepreneurial pursuit. I'm not out here to insult anyone, and I hope I'm not hitting anything too serious for anyone. But like, for example, do you remember when screen printing T-shirts was huge in the side hustle world? Everyone was going to make T-shirts, and everyone was going to be a millionaire making T-shirts. I know several people personally who started screen printing businesses. None of them are still in it, but the first thing I heard is like, yeah, I just made shirts and tried to sell shirts, and that's it. There was no growth. There was no desire to be the biggest shirt seller in the world or have an international T-shirt brand. It never went further beyond just, I work 60 hours a week making shirts, off of some designs. And
well, that's such a perfect example, right? Because like, what problem are you really solving by making shirts?
Exactly.
And again, if you're just taking people's orders of, oh, I want my logo on this, then again, you're just an order taker. You're not really solving any novel problems to provide a lot of value for people. And that's just one of those distinctions. And you can take it outside of the business world as well and apply it to your family and your personal life. I mean, it's all about just ownership. It's about, the focus, just showing up and doing the things and making sure things get completed, but also just always analyzing and always just making things better. You're just always solving the different problems as they come in. So if I plateau on my workouts, well, I'm not just going to be following the same steps or following that whatever program. I'm going to be listening to my body, listening to what I do, and adjust accordingly. And those are how you get a lot more results. So same application, just different parts of our lives, right?
No, I love that comparison. Yeah, and I think that's it. It's just because you started a business, you made a website, and you make some profit does not. I don't think that necessarily qualifies you as an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, you're spot on. They start with the intention of solving a problem, and not saying that like novelty or commodity things can't be entrepreneurial, because of course they can. But it's a matter of how you're running it. Are you just taking those orders and filling them up and you work on your desk in your basement all day long? Or do you have bigger goals? Are you trying to help your customers achieve something or accomplish something? It's a good distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. I always heard a phrase before, you're not really a CEO until people call you a CEO. Because that's one of those things where people will form a company and they do their chart of accounts and like, I am CEO. And it's a business that makes no money. And it's like, are you really on the same level? And we think about all these labels and status things and all this. And it's just really because you put a title there doesn't mean that it has any significance, really. It's all about the actions and the value, and all of the things that you actually produce for others are actually what really matter. And whether, again, it doesn't matter if you're doing that for your own organization or for a company that you work for, or whatever applications in your life. I think it's just following the same processes, having the same kind of skill sets and the same mindsets will lead you much further.
Really kind of one of the last funny anecdotes that reminded me. I once met a woman, and I'm going to have to find this business card. And we lost touch years ago. But she started a business. She probably had 10, 15 employees that worked for her. And her title was not CEO or president or founder or starter. It was on her card, and I got to find it. And I'll send a picture of it to you later. But it was HBIC. It was whatever her name was, head bitch in charge. That's our one curse word to keep our PG-13 rating. And I loved it because it matched her brand. It was a kind of a women's collective. She helped other women's businesses to succeed and stuff like that. But she wasn't a CEO. She wasn't a president. She was Jane Doe HBIC. And I love that. And I never forgot her because of that. So I'm going to find that card. I have it somewhere still.
That's awesome. Well, I think we can wrap up here. If you have been made it this far into the podcast, we would love to hear your thoughts on whether you're an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, what are the real differences that you have found in your life, and maybe if you made the transition one way to the other, what that story and how's that work for you? Because if you're someone like me who has started off on the owning your own business route, moving your way to the corporate world, that's been a big shift, and there's a lot of differences compared to you doing the corporate world and making your way off to be an entrepreneur. Everyone's journey is so different, and I think there's some really neat stories, and we'd love to hear them from you.
Absolutely. Like always, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, wherever you can get your podcasts. Add a comment, throw us a message. We love hearing from you. We will always respond, probably within the same day easily. Tanner and I, we track that stuff, and we love to do that. So yeah, let us know.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for everybody who's been watching and listening. So we will see you all next week. Bye.